Hi crochet besties! If you're new here, I'm Leslie and welcome to what I like to call crochet for icons. And if you're here right now, you're an icon, duh. Today we're going to be working on something fun, so I hope you guys enjoy it because I'm excited. We're going to be working on some furry leg warmers. They're really fluffy furry and they have these heart pom-poms. These are so fun, so cute, at least I think so. And if you think so too, let's get started. You're going to need weight for acrylic yarn in 2 different colors. One color for your leg warmers, I'm going to be using white for mine, and then one color for the pom-poms, I'm going to be using the sparkly light blue. You're also going to need a 5mm hook, any pair of scissors that you have laying around. You're going to need a piece of paper and a pencil. This is just to help us shape our heart pom-poms. And lastly, you're going to need one of these pet brushes that has these like spiky bristles. This is going to help us make our leg warmers fluffy. We're going to start with the color that you want to use for your leg warmers. Start with a slip knot. Just create a loop, and then you're going to put your hook into that loop and then hook onto the yarn and pull it through the loop, and then you just tighten that, and that's your slip knot. We're going to start by chaining enough to fit around your calf or where you want your leg warmers to sit, but we want to make sure that we're chaining in multiples of 2, and this just means that your number of chains can be divided by 2. So for example, 20 can be divided by 2, 22, 24. For mine, I ended up doing a total of 34 chains. After all your chains are done, we're going to be going back into that first chain, so flip over that chain so that our end is on the right side. Then we're going to slip stitch into that first chain, so go ahead and put your hook into that chain and slip stitch. This is how it should look so far, and you want to make sure that your chains are not twisted but instead aligned with each other. Then we're going to chain 1, and for row 1 we're going to be doing 1 single crochet into each of the chains. So single crochet until you reach the end of the round, and crochet around this end so that we don't have to weave it in later. So go back into that first chain that we slip stitched into, and that's where you're going to do your first single crochet. And I'm also going around that end so that we don't have to weave it in. And then continue doing single crochets for the rest of the round. Finishing my last single crochet of the round, and then we're going to slip stitch into that first single crochet we made. This is how the first row should look, and I would advise you to count your stitches at this point just to make sure that you didn't accidentally skip a chain. So I had 34 chains and I ended up with 34 stitches. For row 2, we're going to start by chaining 1, and then we're going to single crochet into each of those first 2 stitches. And then we're going to go ahead and chain 2. And we're going to skip those next 2 stitches and move on to the following 2 stitches, and we're going to single crochet into each stitch. So you should have this sort of hole. And we're going to continue this pattern for the rest of the round. So chain 2, and then we're going to skip those next 2 stitches and then single crochet into the next 2 stitches after that. So it should look like this so far. So go ahead and continue doing the chain 2, skip 2, and then single crochet and single crochet until you reach the end. I'm doing my last skip 2 and then single crochet in the last 2. And if in your last 2 stitches you end up doing single crochets instead of the chain 2, what you're going to do is you're going to chain 1 and then slip stitch at the top of the first single crochet. That's just so that we have a hole in that spot, but if you ended up with a chain 2 at the end, you don't have to do that part. You would just slip stitch into the first stitch. This is how row 2 should look with the holes for our ties. For round 3, we're going to start by chaining 1, and we're going to single crochet into the first 2 stitches, Then we're going to do 2 single crochets into that chain 2 space. Then we're going to do 1 single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. And then we're going to do 2 single crochets into the chain 2 space. And we're going to continue this pattern all the way around until we get back to the beginning. I'm finishing up my final single crochets for this round, and I just want to remind you that if you did the chain 1 the same way that I did for the last round, you want to make sure you only do 1 single crochet into that chain space. If you ended up with the chain 2, then you're going to do 2 single crochets into that chain 2 space. Then you're just going to slip stitch into the first single crochet of the round. And that completes round 3, so you should have something that looks like this so far. Okay, so for this next part, we're going to be flipping our work over, so push it inwards. And for the rest of the rounds, we're going to be working in this direction. So for this next round, start by chaining 1. We're going to start doing our loops for this round, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do it based on the way that you hold your yarn. The first way is going to be if you hold your yarn like I do, like this. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your hook into that first stitch. You're going to take your pinky and your ring finger and you're going to pull that yarn from behind forward. So I'll show you again. I was here and you see that yarn back there, you're going to pull that forward. Then you're going to bring your hook behind that back yarn and over the front yarn, and you're going to bring both of those through the stitch. So you should have 3 loops on your hook. There's these 2 in the front, and then we have this one on the back, and then you should have this loop in the back. So you're going to let go of that loop and then pick up your yarn again, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So we should have our first loop in the back. I'll show you one more time doing it this way. So you enter your hook into the stitch and then bring the yarn forward using your pinky and your ring finger. Bring your hook behind that yarn in the back and also around the yarn in the front. And then you're going to pull both of those loops through the stitch. So you should have the back loop and then the front 2 loops. Then let go of that loop that we're holding. Pick up your working yarn again, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So this is how our loop should be looking like in the back. The next way I'll show you is if you hold your yarn like this. In my opinion, this is the easiest way to do this stitch. With the yarn over your index finger and then your other fingers holding the rest of the yarn. So again, insert your hook into the stitch, bring it behind that back yarn and over the front one and pull both through the stitch. Then let go of that back loop and you're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook. So again, insert your hook into the stitch. You're going to bring your hook behind the back yarn over the front, bring both loops through that stitch, let go of the back loop, and then yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook. And this is how your loops should look so far. I'll show it one more time if you hold your yarn a little different, but it's all the same. If you hold your yarn like this, I'll be showing you, but again, it's the same. So insert your hook into the stitch, bring it behind the back, over the front, bring both of those loops through the stitch, then let go of that back loop. And if you want your loops to be longer, you can pull it up a little bit. Then let go of the loop and yarn over and pull through all of the loops. This might be a little challenging in the beginning, but the more you practice, the simpler it gets. So take as much time as you need practicing these loops and find a comfortable way of holding your yarn. You can make these loops shorter or longer depending on how fluffy you want your leg warmers to be. To get the loops to be about the same size, you can compare the loop that you're working on to the loop before it, and then just do that each time so that they all match up. So continue doing loops for the rest of the round until you get back to the beginning. Here's how your round of loops should look. I finished my last loop in this last stitch, and then that space next to it, that's a slip stitch, so skip that, and then we're going to go into that first single crochet and slip stitch. For the next round, we're going to chain 1 and do 1 single crochet into each stitch for the entire round. I'm finishing my last single crochet, so you can see right here this is my last one, and then next to it is a slip stitch. So skip that, I don't want you to confuse that for a stitch, and then we're going to slip stitch into the first single crochet of the round. At this point I would count my stitches just to make sure that you didn't accidentally increase anywhere. I started with 34 stitches, but because I added that extra chain in round 2, I have 35 stitches. So I should have 35 for this round. For the rest of the leg warmer, it's going to be very continuous. We're going to be doing 1 round of this loop stitch followed by 1 round of single crochets, and we're just going to keep alternating between those two until you reach the length that you want for your leg warmer. So chain 1 for this round, and then you're going to do your loops. Do 1 loop into each stitch for the entire round. I'll keep this part slow for the first couple of stitches in case you want to see again how to do the loop stitch. Then at the end of the row, you're just going to slip stitch into that first single crochet of the round. At this point, the loops are going to look a little goofy right now, but once you start adding more rows, it starts to look more like a leg warmer. So for the next round, chain 1, and then you're going to do 1 single crochet into each stitch. So continue the pattern of 1 row of loop stitch and then 1 row of single crochet stitches. And as you're going, make sure to try it on to make sure that it fits correctly around your calf and over your foot. And I'll quickly show you how to make the loops the same size as I mentioned earlier in the video. So when you start a new round of loops, after you've brought that loop through your stitch, you can compare your current loop to the first loop of the last round. So you can just pull up the other loop, and then if they're not the same size, you can fix your current loop, tighten it or loosen it, and then you can finish off by yarning over and going through all the loops. Then for the next loop, you can compare that one to the one that you just did before. So compare it to that last loop, and then if it's too short, you can loosen it a little bit. Then once it's the same, then you can go ahead and finish off that loop. And then you just keep comparing them as you go. I find that doing it this way really helps with keeping the loops to be about the same size. The loops don't have to be exactly the same size, just about, so don't worry about it too much. I finished my leg warmer to my desired length, and you should have something that looks like this, and usually I like to kind of stretch the sides a little bit. I find that it helps fit a little better. We want to make sure that our last round is a round of single crochets and not a round of our loop stitch. To finish off, we're just going to chain 1, and then you can cut your yarn. I like to leave a little bit of a tail because it helps with weaving in the end. Then to fasten off, you're going to pull that all the way through and then put your hook back into that loop, and then pull your yarn through again, and then tighten that. Then to weave in this end, you're going to thread it through your yarn needle, and we're going to be going underneath the stitches of this last row that we just did. So poke your needle underneath some of those stitches. I like to weave for a couple of inches, and then you can cut your yarn, and that's pretty much it. Then we're going to make one more leg warmer to match this one, so I'll put the pattern here in case you want to go back. Remember that we started with chaining, and then we did 1 row of single crochets, and then we did the chain 2, skip 2, and then we did another row of single crochets. To count how many loop rounds you did, start from the top, and then you're going to count kind of in a straight line is the easiest way, because I know it's hard to see how many rounds you actually did. So try to count them in a straight line all the way down to the bottom. And remember that after each loop stitch, we had a row of single crochets. So work on your second leg warmer and I'll meet you back when I've finished mine as well. After finishing the second leg warmer, I like to kind of just tug on the loops to make sure they're tight. Next, you're going to need your pair of scissors and we're going to be cutting all of these loops, but I'm going to show you a way to do it kind of organized. We're going to do one round at a time. So start with your first round and you're going to cut your loops all the way around. After cutting the entire first round, I like to push those pieces back so that they're out of the way and we can clearly see the second round. So then we can just cut our second round all the way around, all the loops. Continue cutting around and then do it for all of the rounds. And after cutting each round, set those pieces aside so that we can clearly see the next round. Finish cutting the loops for this leg warmer as well as the other leg warmer and I'll meet you back when they're all cut. Here's how it should look all cut up, and I just like to run my fingers through it to make sure I didn't miss any loops. I then just flipped it over so that the holes that are going to have our ties in it are at the top. And then I pushed all of this towards the bottom. And then you're going to need to get your pet brush and we're going to brush out the whole leg warmer. I suggest doing this in sections to really get every single strand. You can brush as much or as little as you want depending on how fluffy you want them to be. I started in this top section and then I started to slowly move to the lower sections, and you want to make sure you're pulling off that extra fluff from your brush. And here's a tip, you can use this as stuffing for your other projects, so don't throw it away. After I'm done brushing, I like to run my fingers through it to take off any extra fluff that might have stayed on there. And I always like to double check because sometimes I have these like bald spots that I need to brush out again. Now you're going to grab your second color and we're going to start working on our pom-poms. You're going to want to cut a piece of yarn a couple inches long and you're going to put this in between your middle finger and your ring finger, so just put that right there. Then we're going to be wrapping the yarn around these 4 fingers. So wrapping it around and then back to the top. This is going to count as 1. And then we're going to wrap again. This is going to count as 2, 3, and you're going to keep going until you reach 50. Then you're going to take that metal string from before and you're going to tie a knot. Then you can cut your yarn, slowly slide the pom-pom off your fingers, and then you're going to want to tighten that center string and create a couple more knots. Then we're going to cut both sides of the pom-pom, so start with one side and cut all the loops. And then also cut all the loops on the other side. Then you can cut those ends shorter to match the length of the pom-pom. Then you're going to take your piece of paper and you're going to fold it in half. Then you're going to draw half a heart along the fold and make it a little bit smaller than your pom-pom. Then you're going to want to cut out your heart. We're going to be using this to shape our pom-pom. Then you're going to use your pet brush to brush out the pom-pom and be careful not to hurt yourself with this. And also make sure that you're holding onto the center so that these pieces don't fall out. Once you've brushed it all out, make sure that this center string is going up and down. Then you're going to take the heart that you cut out and you're going to place it over your pom-pom. And you're going to cut off the excess as best you can to try and get it to look like a heart. So use the paper heart as the guide and trim all the way around. Then you're going to want to do 3 more of these for a total of 4 heart pom-poms. Then you're going to bring out your yarn again and you're going to make a slip knot. And you're going to put your hook underneath that center string of our pom-pom. Try and go through the top of the pom-pom and put your hook underneath. And then you're going to slip stitch around it. And then tighten that slip stitch. And now we're going to chain 150 for our ties. You can do more chains if you want it to be longer. You can do less chains if you want it to be shorter. I like to do 150. I think that's pretty good. Once you have all your chains, you're going to cut your yarn off but leave a longish tail. And then you're going to pull your hook up to kind of create this loop. Then we're going to carefully put our tie through the holes of the top of our leg warmer. So decide where you want the center hole to be and then you're going to thread it through, making sure not to close that loop. So thread it all the way around till you reach back to the center. Then bring out your second pom-pom and you're going to go into that middle string and you're going to slip stitch around it. Then we're going to chain 1 and pull that string all the way through and then tighten that. Then you can line up this string with the rest of the heart and then cut it shorter. And then make sure to brush this part out as well just so it blends in. And then do the same thing with the end to the other pom-pom. So go ahead and cut it shorter and then brush it. Then we're just going to tie this into a bow and you're going to want to do the same thing to the other leg warmer. Then I'm just fixing the bow and the heart pom-poms a little bit. After fixing everything, you should have a leg warmer that looks sort of like this. Then just finish off your second leg warmer to match the first one. And that's it, we're all done. I hope you had fun today. I hope you learned something new. If you decide to make this for yourself, please tag me. I would love to see. Thank you so much for stopping by and following along. I'll leave my social media down below in case you want to follow me. Oh, and if nobody told you today, you're iconic. Duh!